Oh my God, loud noises. Well, we are live, and unfortunately, we are here with no DBRB. This is the second week in a row with no DBRB, and I have brought on board Matterall and Zadis to hopefully be able to run their mouths and make up for a lack of boat. And already we have Luminal Flux with 25 months. Wow, that is really cool. Thank you, dude.
Yeah, trying to fit in those shoes is going to be pretty difficult.
It is. It is. So we're going to be trying to talk about this and that today. Let's see what we've got going on. We've actually got a lot of Eve news this week, which has been a little bit rare. I guess before we get into that, I'll tell everybody at the outset we have two dead keep stars within 1 week. Just before the show started, 5 supercarriers of Legion of Death ate shit in FB5 up in the drone regions. There was a whelp from the Imperium in Sashala, and there's a new Rupture model that looks like a drill bit or a nail gun or a handgun or something or other. And we have an international guest. We have Zadis Rajan, who is old school TCF, of course, proud member of Goonswarm. And Matterall wanted to pepper him with questions about the early days of Goonswarm and TCF and all that good shit. And I'm seeing a ton of resubs here. So let me give some shout outs here real fast. Obviously, we had Luminal Flux. We had Shingley for 9 months. We had K-Beast for Twitch Prime. We have Blast Him to Hell for 10 months, a Horribad, as he said. Uller for 9 months with Twitch Prime. Bezos Bucks everywhere. Zakin 00, Twitch Prime. And you're only here for the Boat Show theme music. Unfortunately, one of the other tragic things about not having Boat with us is that I don't actually have any of the show assets. I have this cool shit that LifeShifter and the guys put together for us, but I don't actually have the meta show intro myself or any of the theme transitions. And Finality 82, thank you so much. So before we get started too much, Matterall, why don't you introduce yourself, and then Zadis can introduce himself, and then we can get stuck in.
Right. So I am Matterall, and I am the creative director for INN. I've been around for about, since 2008 as a player, trying to fit the game into my life, which was really hard because I thought it would take a little bit of time and I could just do it, because you kind of graze your way to the top. You don't have to grind. But that didn't work out very well. So anyway, it got to a point where I thought after consuming so much news and keeping up with all the stuff that I should try my hand at writing some stuff. And that was about 3 years ago. Ended up writing for Eve News 24 because I figured it was the easiest place to get into, and it was. Became an editor there for a while. Then after writing a bunch of stuff there, I think it was about 100 stories, I ended up talking to Matani at Eve Vegas. What was that, 2 years ago?
That's right, it was. Time flies when you're eye lasering people. That was definitely a thing. No, it was a good article. I mean, it was really weird, like reading about myself that you
something you experienced.
Yeah, it's like basically like, oh, this is a whole like article about the other side of this conversation. I mean, I think that you have a really unique perspective on the Imperium and Goons in general. Is you are in NC Dot, you are a member of Lady Scarlet's corporation. I think it was only because of you that we ended up meeting and drinking with Lady Scarlet.
Yeah,
I think that you
cool.
helped make that introduction. So sort of worlds colliding, and. Yeah, so I mean, you started as the Eve News 24 editor and ended up here, which is
I ended up literally thought I'm going to go back to just writing an article every 2 weeks and disappear. And even the name Matterall, for those who don't know, was a throwaway name that I could get rid of. It's not my main or alt in the game. It is now, just to protect the name so people don't, there's no imposters out there. But after writing for a while, I talked to Scion and he said, "Hey, you interested in kind of running the news department?" And I was like, yeah, because that's exactly what I wanted to do, was to shape news and, kind of cover it and create a station. And it was just the next thing to do, right? And that's what I did for a while. And then we made that plan to transfer over the technology to WordPress. And there's a lot of changes, right, that we went through. So kind of like worked on that.
Drupal.
And yeah,
Wow.
And here we are. And so after a while, I thought I just don't have time to write or to read other people's writing. I can only really design stuff. So then I moved over to creative director, and
Only really
I would
design
say,
stuff. I mean, so just a reflection of one of many of the things that Matterall has done for us is INN no longer being the Matane.com and actually having like good art and design is a product of many people on his team. We have Prague has been doing a lot of work, who Uller designed the subscriber badges that we have. We've got a new logo for INN. All of this has been happening under Matterall's guidance recently. So, and of course, Talking in Stations is where I think most people who know Eve know you from, which has been running for a long ass time. How long ago was it that you started Talking in Stations?
that would have been about a year and a half ago. So it was the spring of 2015.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So enough about you and enough about
Yes.
INN. Let's
Too much.
Zetas, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, so I'm Zadis Region. I'm the CEO of Carnival of War. I've been playing since late 2007, so I've been around during the Society Federation era and the old war against Band of Brothers in the south. And I've also been I've been around for a long time, and I've been CEO of MakeUp for the last 4 years.
Heavy is
Inside
the
of,
head that wears the crown.
inside the Gunstorm Federation, and outside of Eve, I'm a paralegal who likes to play video game. That's all.
Sweet. So I guess we're now going to actually like get started. If we had Boat here, we would like have a formal transition to our top story. But we have a bunch of different things we could talk about. I'm not really sure what we want to go into first. We're sort of drowning with news.
Yeah, why don't we tackle what's the latest right now, and that is the Super Capital Brawl and Dronelands. See information on that it's actually breaking news on.
Yeah, we have basically it looks like Nullsignaya Shalupin just dread bombed the shit out of a bunch of Shadow of Exdeath renters who had I don't think we know too much about this yet. We do see already 200 billion ISK of death. Let me drop the battle report here. And we have conveniently one of the things that's really nice about INN these days in the last couple months is we have had a real shakeup in the editorial department. And so we actually have like breaking news when all sorts of things are happening, and you can actually check Imperium News to find out news that's relevant to the Imperium, which is something that wasn't always the case, politely. But yeah, one of the things that we're seeing here is one of our guys pointing out here in chat is Death to Rentersec. It's kind of, I mean, renting in Eve, I think, is in a bad place and getting worse. I mean, with the changes to anomalies. Matterall, have you? I know that NC Dot has, and I don't want to put you in a compromising position, as hilarious as that might be. I mean, NC Dot does have a lot of the drone lands territory is NC Dot renters, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, from my understanding, there's definitely people out there that are renting from NC Dot. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah, but that's a big place, so it depends on where. I think a lot of the renters out there also, aren't they Legion of Death, XX?
Exactly, Shadow of Death. Well, they sold a lot of that territory. So one of the things with this is like the Rorqual changes and the anomaly changes means that Rorquals are going to have to move around quite a lot more, and previously renter empires were based upon renting out a single system. So what we're seeing here is not only hilarious like renter super capitals eating shit, but like in general the prospect of being a renter under the old systems of Eve is sort of an open question now. You can't rent out one system and just have that one system sustain people anymore. You need to actually have people who have no real defense network sort of moving around their Rorquals between systems, which should be hilarious, I think. I don't know. I'm not really sure. What's your view? I mean, have you had people on Talking Stations discussing the concept of renting? Like, is this one of your hobby horses? Do you have a view on renting?
We talked a lot about how the concept evolved, but we didn't really, and we talk about the concept itself. We don't really talk about the practical experience of renting, although that would be an interesting topic. But going back, it seemed like there wasn't this, and it's funny because the term was actually coined by members of the CEO of DICE, coined the term pets. And so, and I think it was some disagreement, and on the forums, he said, like, I have pets that are smarter than you or something like that. and the Russian guy got really mad. And so because it triggered something, people started calling other people pets in a derogatory way.
Well, it probably helped
And
that Sir Mole had, I believe, an entire tent for pets at one of the ancient, infamous Bob barbecues. I seem to remember seeing a photo of one of those that was actually like labeled like for pets. It was a very open thing.
yeah, well, that probably evolved. That's very funny. I didn't know that into kind of is it a vassal state, or where basically you get protected by an empire, but you have some independence to harvest the land.
Well, I think a vassal state would be like a socialist feminist college experience where they also have lots of mining and things like that. Yeah,
I think that's a college.
That's right. Vassal states are it is kind of a weird thing because they can't mobilize them, right? Like you don't actually see very rarely you'll see people try to mobilize renters. But the last time that really happened was during the Great War, where they actually had this weird, like, they were renters, but they were also vassal state pets, and they were expected to, like feudal serfs, mobilize. We used to have renters in Goonswarm fairly recently, and then they all actually just decided to. They kept asking to show up on fights of their own volition, and then they ended up Section 8 just folded into the Alliance proper after a while.
Oh wow. I didn't know what became of them, so that's where they went.
Yeah, we ended up having basically it was like we wanted to treat them like, renters is something that was very controversial in Goonswarm, but we adapted with the game. There's this period of time in Dominion Sov where it was just optimal with what CCP was doing for if you didn't have a renter empire, you couldn't keep up in the arms race in nullsec. And being principled and in highsec and dead and powerless is all well and good, but that's not what our people want.
Did you guys actually run the numbers and figure out like we're falling behind?
The finance team did. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't really go over their spreadsheets very well because I can barely add two and two together. But essentially, whenever CCP is adopting anything, when we compare what's happening with our enemies or our competitors using our spy agency, we basically try to have modeling of relative economic leverage between the major powers in the galaxy. And it got to a point where PL and NC Dot and Legion of Death were renting so much that we ended up needing to create a renter agency of our own just to stay in the game.
Yeah, because before that, you were like adamant about like, oh, that's a terrible practice. It's abusive. We're not like that. Our people are part of us and they enjoy the territory.
Correct.
And then you looked at the spreadsheets and said, guys, we're not keeping up.
Things change, right? I mean, that's basically it. The principles that worked very well back in the day. Like we didn't expect our renters to be feudal serfs. We didn't expect them to come to our barbecues and have a special like second-class citizen, thing, which was always, as Asher mentioned on last week's Meta Show, is sort of enshrined in Band of Brothers is like Evolution Corp's like corp rules, where they have like biatches and daddies and this really weird hierarchical sort of like just weird gay communism system or whatever the hell. So we had Section 8 as renters, which was Aerith's hilarious name for it, and but they kept asking to be able to participate, and essentially our renter section ended up being a talent funnel. Many renters, a lot of goons tried to set up renter corporations to profit off of them, and what they found out was renters would come into renter corporations within Goonswarm and then prove themselves to actually be like good, competent people, and then just instantly get hoovered up by member corps. So I remember I think it was Boat actually complaining really loudly about the fact that he was trying to he was trying to do the stereotypical Eve thing of setting up like a renter farm and going to make money off of renters, and then he was mad because he managed to recruit good people who then proceeded to get recruited into Goonswarm proper.
It's like those are my renters. That's why you go.
Exactly. So yeah.
So that's, but as far as what the nature of being a renter, I thought about it, but only from talking to friends, because a lot of guys actually that are PvPers in nullsec will have a side gig going, right? Whether it be wormholes or industry or renting, where they have space that they can kind of just actually do a lot of their harvesting to generate the money that they use then to fund their capital investments in PvP. So there's a lot of tie-ins with that. But it seems to me like it's kind of like where it's like the country house. It's where you go to relax. It's where you go to, mine and watch TV and stuff like that while you're not being called to service.
Yeah, I think that we've actually had some people who have rented from time to time in the Dronelands on their alts or something like that. They'll just go out there and have an individual renting thing. But that was before sort of the Delve bonanza where everything is ludicrous all the way around. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough thing. Like the game changes and like a lot of the things that used to be matters of vehement principle simply didn't work as time and culture changed. So I mean, you've seen that in like sort of the discourse, the verbal culture of Eve and of the internet as a whole. Like back in 2006, if you just listen to any fleet comms anywhere, it would be just this one long stream of stuff that would get you banned out of every game. And I don't mean just Goonswarm. I mean everything. The culture, internet culture in 2006 was just full of ironic and unironic racism and all sorts of bombs of various flavors that just don't happen anymore. But similarly, there was the reimbursement was a controversy. Like it was incredibly controversial when Goonswarm implemented reimbursement for the first time. We had to call it contingent reimbursement. Now it's just called SRP, and it's like assumed everywhere else in the galaxy. But people were vehemently opposed to the very idea of an alliance reimbursement.
Why didn't they like that? They thought it was unfair?
Well, there used to be this really Eve is, I think, a laboratory for destroying bad assumptions about humanity and how people actually work. One of those assumptions was sort of this, maybe it was a strain of American conservatism or something. Like back in the day in Goonswarm, we were all, the early directorate in Goonswarm around 2006, 2008, we were crazy ideological libertarians. I mean, we set up a fucking free trade zone, like literally based upon libertarian principles in like Scalding Pass. When we took Sov Space, like Remedial, we said we let anybody into the space and we are going to make money off of the free market with like market fees and seriously. And it was a complete disaster. Just like actual libertarian theory. Libertarians normally never get to actually implement crazy ideological capitalist policies, and we did that. Like seriously, like I'm not making this up. The early directorate of Goonswarm, some of whom are still with us today, we all came out of the debate and discussion subforum on Something Awful, and we are a bunch of crazy fucking libertarians. Then we got older and turned into whatever the hell we are today, more on the left or more on the right, but not Lawberts anymore. But yeah, so like part of the challenge with reimbursement was it violated the principles of capitalism and the idea that if you gave people a ship and they lost it, they would not have any incentive, or like they would fly the ship badly. There's basically a bunch of stupid arguments that have all been disproven through the history of Eve, that if you reimburse somebody a ship, they would fly it badly, or they wouldn't have any incentive to show up for a fight because they would not have skin in the game, which is bullshit. People want to fight, because you want to. PvPers usually are only doing PvE because they need to make funds to go back to doing PvP. But yeah, no, it was a huge thing.
Well, that's interesting because it colors a little bit more the socialism of evolution versus you guys a bit more. There's like a philosophical clash going on.
Yeah, there was basically this weird sort of hilarious hypocrisy in time, because evolution was like full space communism, right? Sir Molly's corporation was basically like this full community property, everything is owned by the state. We ended up being militarized socialists, right? So like there's still a tremendous amount of individual capitalism and stuff within Goonswarm and the Imperium, but we did basically go from like full capitalist to full gay space socialism, if not gay space communism. So
well, and that idea hasn't been disproven yet, right? Because it looks like it
works out really well. I mean,
it's working.
Everybody's done it now. Like now it's just the status quo. Like back in the day.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
You're on the record as saying that space democracy doesn't work.
Right, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think, I don't know if we have to like pull out, one of the things that I think is interesting from a political perspective in Eve is how much you do get to implement and test real world political theory. So like, this is one of those things where I'm like, well, we're hostile to democracy as a concept, or we're radical agonistic Democrats, if you really want to get all Chantal Mouffe about it. And then we can pull out, Marx and be like, well, what does Marx have to say about socialism and democracy, right? And I think the answer there, well, I don't know. I think it's when the communists get there, they also don't like democracy. It's pretty pretty complicated. But
Yeah.
I
It
don't
doesn't
know.
matter who comes; they all cut heads off at some point.
That is absolutely true. Well, I think that, Eve is, I've always seen Eve as like a radical democratic autocracy. People choose their dictator because, unlike in the real world, if we lived in a Ian Banks culture style society where you could uproot all of your assets without risk, or shelter them and move them and cross borders without risks, as long as somebody's willing to have you, you could up and go. I think that we would see the real world would have a lot more uh, radical democratic dictatorships. Because in Eve, if I don't like my government, I can just pack up all my shit and leave. In the real world, if you don't like your government, if you don't have enough money, or if you have family ties, you can't just uproot and go someplace else. Like, man, this country sucks. I don't really like living in North Korea. I'm going to go live in Sweden. You can't, which would be awesome in the real world if we had the ability to do that. And I think democracy is a consequence of you have to make compromises and choices, because we can't just uproot and live in whatever weird utopian niche we feel like. But in Eve, you
Yeah.
can do that.
Yeah. Also, in the real world, it kind of follows you sometimes, or I don't know. There's a lot of things in the real world that don't translate very well to Eve, even though we think of it as a thought laboratory, and it is, I guess, to some degree. There's some things that are definitely not true in Eve, and that is, one of them is accountability for past actions. You can literally slip out of your reputation at any time by buying a new character, or now you can just
Sort of. I
transfer
mean,
your skill points.
I think it depends upon your level. Somebody's saying in chat that this is the deepest meta show in a while. I mean, whenever Matterall and I get
Oh, sorry.
no, I don't think it's a problem at all. I mean, I think that
This is
people
what we
like
talk
it.
about.
Whenever Matterall and I get near a microphone, it goes instantly into like heavy political theory and like social dynamic stuff. But basically, I think that there is a degree of accountability in Eve. Like, once you get to, I think at the low level, like basically in the real world, if you are a petty thief, right? Like if you're sticking up gas stations, you'll get thrown in jail and held accountable. And in Eve, you can do lots of petty theft and lots of petty bullshit and recycle characters, and you'll never get caught. But if you actually attempt to be a power player or a power broker, there are ways outside of the game where people find each other, right? You leave any kind of counterintelligence is based around forensics, essentially. So people at the higher levels of the metagame are looking at IP addresses. People try to use VPNs and things like that. There's a lot more accountability. The more you succeed, the more accountability will follow you, even if you try to avoid it. So the lower level Eve can help you dodge accountability. 28 months, god damn, Hildifer. Thank you. That's pretty awesome.
Nice.
This is literally Talking Station's Discord, Dirk says. I don't know. I mean, what do I'm curious about this. What do you think is from your perspective, Matterall, what do you think is like the weirdest, what makes you the most confused about the political structure? Is there anything in terms of the politics of Eve that has always left you scratching your head?
No. Well, there's always interesting things about what motivates people to be together in a group, what motivates people to stick around, loyalties, betrayals, and all that kind of stuff is all very interesting. What makes those things happen? As far as like the political structure from the outside and how things are governed, what is interesting that I haven't delved too far into is the different growth rates, like or evolutions of a political thought that keeps a group together. For instance, Pandemic Legion is like, hey, we're all just a bunch of athletes, and we're not going to tell you what to do. Whoever is the quarterback that campaign is the quarterback that campaign. We just step back and let you guys do what you want to do. It's a lot to ask that kind of a group to really kind of clamp down on bad behavior they want to get rid of. It would be difficult. So there's that kind of idea and some of its drawbacks. NC, it's a lot more like, get with the program. This is the program. You're under this rooftop. You're a soldier for these, for this army, and this is how we move. And then there's, the Imperium or a Goon Swarm, and how that's, you have a huge group to kind of, I think, to kind of control and grow a group like that. Like, I don't even know how that kind of thing is possible, but you have, how has that even evolved? Like, what was it like before, and how has it changed to what you have now?
Well, I mean, it gets really heavy in terms of theory, which is something that, I mean, sometimes I think that we should have, like, I don't know, like a whole like political theory and psychology like show for this kind of shit, because I find it fascinating. It gets really deep. Like in Eve is one of the only areas that you can really experiment with the creation of groups and tribes and how tribes combine. There was a book that was recommended to me by Sion Kumitomo, my former chief diplomat and chief of staff, called Tribal Leadership, and Aerith, who's on the finance team, also recommended it, and I read it. And it basically talks about like there's these linguistically derived, and I am not making this up. The book is called Tribal Leadership, and I only read it like 2 months ago, so this is relatively new to me. It came out in 2008, but this book has actually confirmed a lot of the things that in the leadership in Goonswarm and the Imperium we've all experienced. But essentially, you can find it's a more scientific way of describing how people see the world because it actually just listens to what they say. It doesn't try to analyze what's in their heads. It looks for linguistic markers and patterns of speech. Like, is somebody referring to themselves, like I'm great and you're not? Are they saying like, well, life sucks, but it's okay for some other people? Are they saying things in an attitude of like everything sucks? Are they saying like we are great, like our tribe, our people, our we group success, group dynamics? And I've seen a lot of this sort of stuff play out in Eve. How does Goonswarm start? You know, in many ways, the people who are now leaders of Goonswarm, because it's not just me, I could do none of this alone. The people who are leaders in Goonswarm are leaders because the people have essentially chosen them and chose to follow them. Right, like I can't. I have seen with NC and with PL and various other smaller, more elite organizations, which we call Dunbar's number groups, because they're usually about 150 or less real human beings, which is Dunbar's number. You can have somebody at the top saying, "I'm going to fire a red pin over the alliance. You have to turn up on this op. My way or the highway. I'm the boss." I literally couldn't say to people, "I'm the boss, you have to do what I say because I'm the Mittani." I just ended up in charge, and now nobody wants this job. I'm basically just the crazy guy who has it, right? So it's really hard to describe. It's like this weird evolutionary process.
Well, not everybody has a red shirt, so.
Exactly. I mean, basically that's really what it is. If somebody else just started wearing a red shirt, they could swoop on by and like steal Goonswarm from me. Just like goons just respond to red. Exactly. I've got the conch. I've got the red shirt.
They're like bulls, right?
Exactly. Well, this is, I think, a good time for us to segue and annoy Zadis.
Yeah.
And maybe we could ask Zadis. I know, Matterall, you got a bunch of questions about the early structures of TCF. I remember the days when Robopin was the boss of TCF, and back when Amarame was their chief diplomat. What was it that you wanted to know about the early structure of TCF? Matterall, why don't you interview Zadis?
Well, yeah, a little bit of history, and that is when I guess it was Cartoon decided not to pay the soft bills because he went on vacation. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Everything went shit, and you guys collectively retreated to Syndicate. So Goonswarm is out of the territory they took over from Bob, and they're in Syndicate, and they're kind of like,
curse, yeah,
it was. And it was, it was like, I really thought that was kind of the end of Goonswarm. And I was there kind of attacking you guys. I was a pilot for Dead Terrorists at the time. And then we saw you guys move up north to Tau Ceti Federation territory. And there was this very public statement from Tau Ceti saying like, well, these guys have been good to us and they're our friends. And so
Silmarius hooked us up. Yes.
Yeah. Was that a very public hookup, or is that just something I read on the forums?
It was pretty public. I mean, it was Declan was packed. We had the Declan coalition there, TNT, Black Core Alliance, and Ona Alliance. At which point TCF sort of put us in there and allowed us to crash on their couch. I mean, the couch is actually a pretty well-known concept amongst the autocrats in Eve because, when Death lost his shit, we gave him a couch as well during the big Solar X-Death Civil War many years ago. Now Death has all of his shit back. But essentially what had happened with Goonswarm is it wasn't Cartoon forgetting to pay the soft bills. Nuance there. He had appointed an absentee finance director. This is why Goonswarm has such a great finance team now, is that recovering from all of this, we overcompensated. Instead of having one finance guy who could go AFK and like forget to pay the soft bills, now we have like a bunch of rabid financiers who have helped us do all the things we've done since then. But then we went from Syndicate and we went to Curse, and I was given CEO-ship in May of 2010 when we were in Curse in XX9, and we couldn't get 30 people on a fleet. Like we were just absolutely. It wasn't just the Alliance was ashes. It was like cold ashes that have been, I don't know, frozen and just covered under who knows. It was a disaster area. And then we ground, and we got up to about 50, 70, next thing you know, 100. We're actually getting proper fleets. We're engaging in a little slap fight in that area. And then Silmarius, TCF, is basically like, hey, you guys want to crash in DKUK? And we're like, hell yes, TCF out of nowhere. And that is how we ended up back in the bosom of TCF. As opposed to before, where we were working with them in the early days with Wicked Creek. So now I'm going to shut up about this because that's the Goonswarm side of the story. And,
that's the setup. And Zetas, you're from Tau Ceti, is that right?
Yes, that's right. But as I said, told you earlier, I wasn't there. Wasn't like in the directorate, the high top directorate at that time, but as I could say, corporation director at that time, the decision to give space to Goonswarm was just natural because we've played with them for a very long time in the south. We fought Bob with them, and when they were in trouble, it was just normal to give them some space. And this part of Declan, DKUK Constellation, was free to be used by someone, so it was just.
Were you guys part of Northern Coalition at the time, or are you just neighbors?
No, to be honest, we were just neighbors. There was some propaganda saying Tau Ceti Federation to the Northern Coalition, like we were joining them, but in essence, we were two separate entities. There was the old Northern Coalition, and there was the Tau Ceti Federation taking Declan's, but we were not like the new, bigger Northern Coalition.
Yeah. Now, to be clear, Northern Coalition was coalition in the north before Northern Coalition DOT, which is the group that they're totally separate for people who don't know that. In fact, Northern Coalition DOT was a meme on Northern Coalition. So it's to confuse them when they talked about the enemy, it would sound like themselves. Unfortunately, Northern Coalition DOT survived a long time, and so now it inherited Northern Coalition is kind of the name. But in Tau Ceti, like how many? What was the decision like? Do you remember to give up the alliance and go into Goonswarm?
Well, like the end of Tau Ceti Federation, you're talking about?
Yeah.
To be honest, the alliance was dying because Tau Ceti Federation was based on one person and only one person. It was Frederick. It was the first CEO of Tau Ceti Federation. He was the appointed CEO, in fact, because if I remember well about what I read, it was Amerame that did a lot of diplo between the old French Corp very long time ago to put something up to build Tau Ceti Federation, and finally Frederick ended up being the CEO. And Frederick was only him can be the CEO. So when he left, Joshua Kane became a CEO, but it was not the same because he was more like an FC type person and lacked a lot of capability of administration that you need as an alliance CEO. And after him, it was Silmarius. Helped by Dark Angelus, who was also in Kernel of War. And that was a good balance because Silmarius had a good experience in corporation leadership and was also an FC, and Dark Angelus had a lot of experience in diplomacy and basic gestion of an alliance. So when Silmarius became CEO was because Section 13, that is now, I think, in Goonswarm. I'm not sure. They tried to get in. I think they got in.
I think S13 was in Goonswarm for a while. I have to check again because there's always been a little bit of flux. French corporations, one of the things that the French, we've talked about this before, is that they've always, in some areas, there's been a degree of internal disagreements and drama and bullshit. Not really so much, like TCF never really had a problem with that. There was occasionally like Pulsar Inc. like left and then they came back, and Section 13. It's hard to follow all of the French drama basically, but Oddly enough,
What's French?
well, it's not just that it's French. It's just that the French that we were dealing with, I think that like attracts like. Goonswarm has always been an autocracy. Red Alliance, back in the founding days of the Red Storm Federation, which of course TCF and I think I don't remember whether it was Frederick or Robopin was in charge of TCF back in the day. I know Amarame was their diplomat because he and I talked all the fucking time. It was basically like TCF, we would speak to them because the leader of TCF at the time spoke essentially no English at all, but Amarame was incredibly eloquent. So like it would be, and it was sort of the same deal with Red Alliance. Is Mactep didn't speak a word of English, but Nink and Death could speak for Mactep. So we basically had people like me and Amarame and Nink and Death sort of communicating for our leaders, because I was not the leader of Goonswarm at the time. Sort of an interesting nexus there. So I might actually look up to see. I'm trying to remember, so I don't. Yeah, Robopin is still the CEO of Section 13, but they are not in Goonswarm anymore. I think that they left / were removed in January of 2016.
Yeah,
So,
because I heard that they came back inside the alliance because the left like Robopin and his close directorate left the game a while ago, and they tried to come back in game and rebuild S13. But the problem is S13 always had that elitist PvP type cooperation style. That's why they went inside PL after TCF. PL, sorry. And the problem with that kind of player is you can come back and act like the big boss if you don't know how to play the game. So they try to get Section S13 back to the top, but every good PvP player has moved on to better things at that time.
Yeah, it didn't surprise us. I mean, we were very flattered and very happy, but like it wasn't really like my God, I'm shocked that TCF offered us a couch, right? Because one of the things you got to keep in mind about Goonswarm back at the time that Silmarius offered space for Goonswarm in 2010 is I think our maximum fleets at the time, like we were starting to get back together and we hadn't died in a fire, and I was taking my first baby steps as a CEO, and I think we had maybe 150 people in a fleet. Maybe we had filled a fleet, but it wasn't like, hey, we're offering 40,000 people to come crash in a constellation, right? Like giving Goonswarm a couch to crash on was not like a really huge burden for TCF at the time.
Yeah, totally. It's sure you can compare Goonswarm back then and Goonswarm today. It's totally different. Yes.
Yeah. Then there was all sorts of hilarious things with Black Core Federation trying to cause issues, and then we kind of killed everybody in the Declan Coalition except for TNC, who we became best buddies with forever. But it was like Declan Coalition Survivor there for a bit.
Yeah, who gets voted out?
Yeah, well, it was like the back in the day, because then we got like Test Alliance on board, and so we got rid of Own Alliance with Teredrum by having the infamous Test Aid Convoy and essentially unleashing Dur on Own Alliance, which provoked that Teredrum guy into like losing his shit and then getting fired out in airlock. Black Core Alliance, Numenor, Balinor, we simply said you're refusing to go on a strat-op and think that you're better than us, and you're just gone. And yeah, so it was.
So you joined an alliance basically, and as you were growing stronger, you're having to knock these guys out basically, and at the same time you're growing up this nascent Test, right? Because that's when Test was kind of born.
It was basically by the time that we got to Declan, if I remember correctly, and I'd have to check the archives of Corpse Diplo, is we had already like I think that TCF offered us to take the space and like move in, but I think we waited for a while because we had like moved too quickly. Like essentially, I don't like to move staging systems more than once every 3 months because you always like lose people, especially if you're an alliance at a time of trauma. Every time you move staging systems, people will like quit the game or go inactive. So like we had moved from Syndicate to Curse, and that was like really rapidly after the Delve thing. And I think Silmarius offered that we could get space in Declan really early on. And I seem to remember basically going, whoa, 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 like we appreciate the offer, but we can't move our people yet, right? Because people will just quit, right? So we hung around and cursed for a little bit. So by the time that we got there, like there was definitely like Black Core Alliance was a thing, and we weren't part of the Northern Coalition, the old one. So like there was still all these like really nasty internal politics happening with the Northern Coalition. But Goonswarm was pointedly not part of it. TCF was not part of it. We had like shared comms and like General's tab with them, which was that infamous command channel that got leaked, full of FC slap fighting and having designed by committee bullshit. And basically when people would, I think Black Core Alliance tried to do the committee bullshit, like we're going to report you to, like, oh, well, we're a member of the Northern Coalition and we're not, we don't have to take orders from Goonswarm or have anything to do with you or whatever, so we're not going to go on the strat-op. And there's, like, at the time the Northern Coalition was getting attacked by the Russians, right? This was the great fall of the North that was starting to take place just as we were out there, and this is what creates the clusterfuck later. And so my attitude was, you're explicitly thumbing your nose at us when we are getting together for a strat op for the defense of Declan, and I'm literally just going to purge you. And nobody gave us permission to do it. We didn't talk to anybody about it. It was just, and they ran and screamed and begged to Vaclav, I guess, who was too busy RMTing and didn't care. So, as we now know, I didn't know that at the time. But yeah, so no,
that's funny. That guy, that was his real name too. So he's RMTing with his real name.
Exactly. Noisy Gamer is asking, did Master ever get upset about people mispronouncing his name? It should be pronounced Master. Yeah, it's sort of like Nink is actually poops. If you put it pronounced appropriately from the Cyrillic, but Master almost never actually spoke to anybody who wasn't Russian directly, so it didn't really come up.
No.
Oh, so, wow. Poxbox is saying that FCON is the top of the list of shrinking alliances. I need to actually take a look at this.
Check that out.
I am.
One other question I had, and this involves kind of Tau Ceti 2, Tau Ceti's in there with you guys. When the Northern Coalition is falling, it looked like, wow, this is going to be, okay, the goons didn't actually die off. They survived that, whittling down process. This is the end of goons, because once Russians take out Northern Coalition, they're just going to keep going right through Decline.
Well,
that didn't happen.
Well, I mean, Russians know better than anybody. Like, we fought alongside the Russians for, like, essentially, by the time that Goonswarm didn't die, and we were ensconced in Declan, by and large, everybody knew better than to, like, if that couldn't kill us off, right? What could? And this is a lesson that got forgotten through history, is that, periodically there'll be times where people get together, they're like, oh, this time we're going to kill goons for real. What was interesting about the Casino War is that even you had people during the Casino War who were leading it and basically going like, well, we don't actually think that you can kill Goonswarm off for real, but we're getting paid to try to do it, so whatever. Like, back in the day, there was, at the time that we lost Delve the first time, the Great Whelp, there was discourse about actually getting rid of goons, and now people sort of see us as this unkillable alien monster. Our power can ebb and flow. We can lose lots of shit. We can get really stupid. But almost immediately, the Russians who were invading the Northern... We were basically like, we are not part of the Northern Coalition. And the invading Russians were like, Goonswarm is not part of the Northern Coalition. And so everything else got torched, but they didn't want to fuck with us, and they declared mission accomplished, and that was that. And then everything that was left of the Northern Coalition, in one of my fits of pique, I said, well, this is a clusterfuck, let's just call it a clusterfuck, and that's how the CFC was born.
The Clusterfuck Coalition.
Yep.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, it was literally like, that's one of the reasons why people were butt blasted when so when I got Goonswarm, it was actually named Solo Drachman, Solodra, right? And one of the first things that I did once we had stabilized and cursed was to kill the Alliance name and replace the Alliance as Goonswarm Federation, because I didn't want us to take space under another Alliance name, because then that would be really hard to clean up the SOV. And I named the CFC by looking around and going, wow, they've got all these people. The thing to keep in mind about the original CFC is we didn't really like each other that much, right? Like, this is really a key point. Like, Goonswarm got along great with TCF and YDOT, but culturally speaking, and we can say this now because they're not part of the coalition anymore, but culturally speaking, it's almost impossible to get as far away from Goonswarm as FCON, right? Or
Mhm.
Space Monkeys, right?
They
And
wouldn't join you on some of the things you did, like Bernjita and stuff like that, right?
exactly. And so it really was a coalition created out of who's left after the Russians had conquered parts of the north and settled in, like White Noise and Branch. And so I just called it a clusterfuck. So later, when I renamed the coalition the Imperium, people were like, "Oh, you can't do this." I'm like, "Well, motherfuckers, I named it. I named the alliance. I named the first coalition. Whatever." In this area, I guess it's sort of hypocritical because earlier I was saying like, well, I can't actually just tell people what to do because that doesn't work that way. But in some
Well, but
areas, there is
you can
executive
change a title.
privilege.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because the thing is that the clusterfuck stopped being a clusterfuck. It became a space empire. Goons like to play empires in space. Like we like to play civilization in space. We are empire builders. Goons have tried to be anarchists who don't have space and things like that, and goons just stop playing, right? There's a few goons that enjoy not empire building, but we have always drawn that kind of player. So after a certain point, the clusterfuck became the single most organized entity in the galaxy, and I think that the Imperium reflects that, and also we don't have to deal with any crap like with AFCON or SMA anymore, which is nice.
Yeah. You could tell that was going to break off actually when things were going on, because there just seemed to be daylight between what they kept saying. Well, we're not really like Goons Swarm, but
well, it's
no
true.
point.
I mean, I think that values are really what stick people together. Like, again, it goes back to what we were talking about at the very start of the show, where in an environment where everybody can, with relative safety, using freighter services, or you can lose some stuff, but you can't lose your actual life, right? Your spaceship might get blown up, but it's not like you're trying to run across a border covered in barbed wire, like Checkpoint Charlie style, and like a guard with a machine gun guns you down and you're dead, game over, right? Like it's not papers, please, as Luminal Flux was pointing out earlier. So you can move with relative safety. So what I think that sticks coalitions and alliances together really is communications of shared values. What are we here for? Why are we here together? What makes us a tribe? And that is one of the things, is that since we have changed the name of the coalition, forged the Goon Hammer, people are flocking to that banner because I think it effectively communicates what it is that we are an imperial socialized autocracy, and we make no bones about it, and people like that. It's not a clusterfuck. It hasn't been for years. So.
What about, and speaking of values, it seems like what happened to Lon? Because Lon was
Lon's
with
still
you
around.
guys. Lon is still around, but they're not with you guys. Or actually, the people who founded Lon, the people who owned it and cultivated it, were kicked out. What happened there?
Oh, you're talking about the Vulpines thing. Well, I don't think that the
Yeah.
Vulpines actually founded Lon. I'd have to dig into that. But Basil and what's her face, Eingang Vulpine, we caught them being dodgy, right? Like they were, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was either embezzling. There was some really shady shit that was going on, and one of our diplomats can probably remind me in chat exactly what it was. But Lon went from being very poorly led. This was one of the better things I think we did. So Lon currently is led by Duncan McLean, and before him, Thoric Frosthammer. Basil and Eingang were this sort of weak leadership, very old Northern Coalition style. And then after we confronted them with the fact that they were stealing from the Alliance and they had tried to like segregate Alliance funds for themselves and all this other shady shit, Thoric Frosthammer, who I should actually describe as Thoric motherfucking Frosthammer, came on board, and he was already in Lon. And he turned Lon from being an alliance of old folks, which they are mostly older gamers in the like 40 to 50 age range, and really just sort of unleashed the dangerously hardworking killer aspect. Like Lon turned from being kind of just a generic Northern Coalition alliance into a bunch of angry old assholes, to the point that under Thoric's stewardship, we still tell stories about how the party suite, the Lon party suite, remember, this is the alliance of older gamers in what's now the Imperium, trashed their Vegas party suite. Actually, I think it was somebody else who was there. But there's like $10,000 worth of damage at Vegas a couple years ago. It was at the lawn party suite, not the Goonswarm one.
Yikes.
Yeah, no, it was pretty badass. I was very proud. I'm still smug about that.
And that party suite was awarded by CCP, so they had to pick up
Even better. Yeah, no, it was baller as all hell. So, Lon is really one of the interesting success stories of the people who came out the other side of the CFC. Duncan was at Eve Vegas most recently, and he looks like an investment banker, basically, like the sort of he looks like actually almost like I'd say a TV version of a venture capitalist or something, like silver-haired suit, like a very serious individual with lots of gravitas. But yeah, the Vulpines were just embezzling and doing some dumb bullshit, and we caught them on it, and then they ran off to create Blades of Grass, and then Thoric took over, turned that thing around, and now you see the Vulpines on what was it, FanFest video going, our values make us different, our values make us different, but they never actually explained what their values were. But I'm sure they have them because they chanted that loudly at FanFest.
Yeah, that was a little cringy, I must admit.
Yeah.
But I feel bad for them because they had the name Lon. It was basically taken away from them. And I guess then they were split off.
The name was taken away from them because I shot them. Because we caught them embezzling. Yeah, I mean, we purged them. Like, we found that the leaders were screwing their membership, so we essentially leveled a gun at them and said, get the fuck out.
Okay, wasn't some of that information later proved to be all coming from one source, the guy that took it over?
No.
So it came from different sources? It came from different sources? All right.
I mean, the thing is that it's hard to... Nobody is ever rightfully guilty in EVE Online. Like, I'm certain that the Vulpines have whatever story that they have to claim that they were wrongfully booted out. But if they were wrongfully booted out and everybody still believed in them, Blades of Grass would have been a lot bigger. Because here's the thing. You can say that these guys are embezzling and they're doing a whole bunch of shit. And if people thought that we were wrongfully, like, if people thought that, oh, this is just something that's coming from the Mittani and it's totally not legitimate, Lon wouldn't have gone from strength to strength after the Vulpines were removed. And everybody would have left. I mean, keep in mind here that if I go to another alliance and I say, your leader sucks, get rid of them, if they like their leader, they can say, fuck you, no, and then just go somewhere else, right? People choose to follow the leaders. The leaders are leaders because people choose to follow them. So if the Vulpines weren't shady as shit, and if Lon was actually having some sort of weird imposition from without, it just wouldn't have happened. Like, it wouldn't have worked that way.
Yeah. Well, where did Blades of Grass end up going? Did they join up with FCON or something?
I think they ended up in Declan briefly. Like, they were sort of hangers-on during... Let me look them up right now. They're like hangers-on during the Casino War, and they currently have 1,000 members, 1,076 members, and they have SOV in... literally, their motto on Dotlan, on their description, is Blades of Grass, our values make us different.
It must be why they...
Drag me with a fucking spoon. Jesus Christ.
Well, they tried to chant that, but it looked like they agreed to all say it together, and only two of them said it.
I don't think anybody else agreed to that. I think that was the line members there, and that was Basil and Eingang who were chanting it. And they're up in Branch, rotting away, basically. Yeah, they're GOTG pets. Wow.
All right, so that's who they're with. Darkness, I guess, that group, Guardians of the Galaxies. All right, well, I wondered about that schism because there's a lot of... I actually talked with Thor about it and stuff, and he explained kind of how it happened. And I guess the bottom line is, you're right. People stuck with Thoric because they wanted to, and they stuck with you guys because they wanted to. You can't take that away from people. They decide with their feet, especially in a game like EVE, where you can just up and move.
Exactly. Like, you'll see that so often with when you get a director in many corporations, right? And we've seen this drama play out a million times with a million different faces. It's not unique to Nullsec at all. Is somebody is given a badge, right? They're a newly promoted director, and they probably shouldn't have it because they think that their power comes from their title. And so they run around and go, well, you have to listen to me now because I'm a director and blah, blah, blah. Look at my shiny badge. Not realizing that power comes from people choosing to follow you. So that's a constant mistake. Is people have a position, they have a title, they inherit a leadership position or something like that, and then they assume that they can just do whatever, and then drama inevitably results.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Again, I'm drawing you back into philosophical stuff, and we wanted to talk about other.
Well, that doesn't bother me. I could talk about the shit all day, actually. But
I could too.
Speaking of talking about the shit all day, we are actually running out of time. We have been streaming for an entire hour, so if we have any last questions, we've got a couple of other things going on that we should at least briefly mention. We have, there's 2 Dead Keep Stars. There's one in Alga, and there is one. Where was that CVA one?
I was in 3D. Let me check. Just wrote the battle report for it. So 3D Attack, CQU.
And I think I mentioned this at the start of the show. CCP has released a new Rupture, and it looks. I gotta say, I think the new Rupture looks kind of lame. Like I'm not feeling it. Like a lot of the redesigns I've seen recently have been baller as fuck. New Cormorant redesign, amazing. In general, I get very excited about the redesigns, and I'm not really sure whether I'm like meh on the Rupture just because brown is not my favorite color, or because it looks like a nail gun, or I don't know. I'm actually kind of curious what people think in chat, whether people like it or not. I don't know whether I'm the odd man out there. New Rupture looks retarded as fuck, ugly but fucking ugly.
That's a quote.
Yep, exactly. And you scroll all the way to the bottom, you get to see the new one on this article, and it's a thing, I guess.
Hey, where are you? Go ahead.
You say. I'm just cringing.
All right. Well, it's just art right now. I want to ask you something that probably people are wondering. Where are you on the whole Summer of Rage thing? Do you feel like CCP isn't moving well enough on it?
I think that it's really hard for. Maybe I'm just like a grizzled veteran of flying to Iceland 5 times in 1 year, right? For me, a Summer of Rage is something completely different. Like, it's really... So, the moment that I see a bunch of people really getting mad on Reddit about anything, I am instantly skeptical. I'm only surprised that they're not getting mad at me or getting mad at Scion or whatever. So, the mere fact that there's a bunch of Redditors who are upvoting something a shitload immediately makes me want to just ignore everything they're saying. I think that there are definitely issues here. I think that there was a shit show of messaging. I mean, I think that there wouldn't be a formal Summer of Rage, and it's not a real Summer of Rage compared to what happened before. The subscriber numbers are not, I don't know what they are, but I'm pretty certain that it's not, oops, you've lost half of your subscriber base instantly, because when that happens, CCP does a lot of different things. I think that what happened there is people are pissed at Fozzie for the nerfs to Rorquals, and then Larrikin had I thought a reasonable nerf to carriers. I mean, within the Goonswarm Directorate, we've discussed it extensively, and we actually didn't have a problem with the carrier nerfs at all, but they weren't taken in a vacuum. They were taken in the context of all these other shitty nerfs that have happened to people's PvE. And then CCP Quant came in and poured gasoline on the fire by basically calling out Reddit for being Reddit. I mean, the reality is that the people who are screeching on Reddit are the top 1% of the 1%. And it's not even that they're the top 1% in terms of their wealth. It's just they're the people who hang out on R-Eve and upvote each other and think that upvotes win wars, when demonstrably they don't. He poured gasoline on that fire, which I love doing that. Like, I love finding a whole bunch of really angry Redditors and then just pissing all over them and making them have aneurysms. But he shouldn't be. I don't think that CCP should be on Reddit at all, period. Like, I've said this for a long time. Simon has said this for a long time. The only reason why this has happened, it is a completely avoidable scandal, pseudo-scandal, is the company should be communicating on their own forums through official channels and not having these willy-nilly conversations. They are putting themselves at the mercy of a mob, an extremely problematic mob, and it's a mistake that many games companies have made in the past and have walked away from. A lot of games companies do not ever post shit on Reddit, except maybe they'll have like one officially designated community manager. I mean, R-Eve is a festering shit pile, and this is what happens if you think that you're talking to the community. You can't say, basically, I guess let me try to articulate this better. you can't say on the one hand that you're listening to the community because you're going and letting your company employees post on Reddit. And then when the going gets tough because you're listening to the community of Redditors who play your game, which is a small proportion of the people who are actually playing your fucking game. Our Eve is not your customer base, sorry. And then when you're unhappy with what they're saying, you can't then go, oh, well, you don't matter. Even though we were saying you were listening to the community, you guys don't matter anymore because we don't like what you're saying. You can't have it both ways. Either you have got to worship at the altar at the festering pile of dog shit, which is Reddit culture, the Reddit mobs. Now, of course, there are good Reddit subreddits out there, but REve is a festering shit pile. You can either worship at the altar of the festering shit pile, or you can say the festering shit pile doesn't matter, it's just 1% of 1% of players. You can't worship and then try to distance yourself. And that's why we are where we are today, because that's what Quant did, and it was dumb. And I'm sure that they've apologized and they've backed away from it, but it just seems like Reddit drama to me. It doesn't seem like a real Summer of Rage.
There you go. Very succinct.
With by succinct, you mean a very long and inarticulate rant.
That last sentence was it.
Yeah, it's it's tough. It's hard to distinguish a real scandal because of that. Because basically, and I don't think this is unique to REve. Like, I'll shit on REve, and a lot of very good reasons to do so. But I think that there's something about the structure of Reddits is that it gives people like a rush, like a dopamine rush. It gives people a head rush. They get excited to participate in a mob. And what we've seen in a lot of Reddits is sometimes they can be a positive mob, like we're all going to upvote this one thing. And everybody who somebody will say, please don't upvote this thing. And it'll be like even like a 40K Reddit, something that has nothing to do with Eve. And everybody will get like a rush by upvoting something to 1,000 things. And sometimes it's a hate mob of we're mad at this company or that company or whatever. But I think the structure itself creates mobs, and those mobs have got to go somewhere. And that's why it's dangerous for companies to pay attention to this, because if there's nothing for the mob to do, somebody's going to find something to be butt blasted about and rally around the pitchforks.
Yeah, it takes that one guy to throw the Molotov cocktail and everybody charges.
Exactly.
Right.
All right, well, I've been keeping us here for a little bit longer for my extra little rants there, but so I'm going to let everybody go. Thank you all so much for watching, guys, and also thank you to Matterall and to Zadis for being our guests, and it's been a pretty cool show. Of course, I'm biased because I like talking about society and technology, all that weird shit.
It's interesting stuff. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Zadis, for telling us about how things work with TCF. And we will be back next week. Hopefully we'll have Boat. I don't, worst case scenario, maybe if Boat isn't here, which I hope to hell he is, I might drag Matterall back on. I don't know, so we can have more law, culture, and society discussions about EVE Online. Thanks for coming, guys, and we will see you all next week.
Take care.